your worst fear.
I didn't get the demon out. It's my fault.
Because it feels so good to ruin such innocent flesh.
It feels like it knows me. Like it's calling me.
Chilling story that came from one of Gedolei Israel from about 450 years ago. Maharan Rav Natan Neta Shapiro. Zecher Tzadik v'Kadosh Livracha. He wrote many Sfarim. One of them was a Sefer called Megale Amukot. And that was his most famous Sefer. Now this story was told to me by a dear friend of mine. And this is a true story. Where at the time of the Megale Amukot, there were two orphan boys. And these boys were raised by their uncle, who did not teach them Torah, mitzvot. Rather, was full of bad midot, bad behavior. And that's what they learned from. As they grew up, eventually they took over his business. He was selling kosher meat. But since every generation is worse than the next, they decided to deliberately feed the Jewish community non-kosher meat, but sold it as if it's kosher. This is causing the public to sin in a massive way. How the halakha works, someone that is caught selling non-kosher meat intentionally, their permission to sell meat is revoked permanently. These two orphans, for years, made a fortune selling non-kosher meat to the community. But one day, Hashem opened up the gates of heaven in mercy for them and gave them an opportunity to see the truth. Where they heard a Shiur Torah. And in the Shiur Torah, they heard about the severity of eating non-kosher meat. And both of them realized that they've been living a life of sin beyond their imagination. And they ran to the Baal Megale Amukot and asked, what do we do after making so many people sin, after sinning ourselves with non-kosher meat? He gave them specific instructions of how they can do tshuva. And they were told secretly to give away all of their money, change their clothing, and go into the exile, where contact with their families was forbidden, and they were never to sleep in the same town for 2 nights in a row. Every town they went to, they had to go outside the local shul and confess their sins. They were instructed that they must give the community permission to punish them. They were never to ask or accept food, clothes, or money. For food, they were only allowed to accept whatever was necessary to keep them alive. In so many words, they had to constantly be hungry. They were not allowed to sleep in anyone's home except for Shabbat and Yom Tov, and when they will complete their tikkun and tshuva, they will get a sign that they can return to their hometown. And if they do all of this, said the Megale Amukot, it will save them from a harsh heavenly judgment. After over 3 years of this tshuva, that these two orphans, that are now older men, were given the sign. What was the sign? They found out that both of their homes, back home, and their families, and everyone in it, burned and died. Everything destroyed, leaving no survivors. And they understood that they could now return to their hometown. And upon arrival, they went directly to the Megale Amukot, and he gave them a parchment scroll, stating that their tshuva is complete. The two friends made a deal that whoever dies first must come back to the other one in a dream to describe exactly what happened to them in the heavenly court. One day, one of them died, and the surviving butcher waited until the night after the 30 days, the shloshim, for his friend to appear. He expected to see him, black and broken, just as he has seen him and known him until his death, a destroyed person from years of suffering due to the tikkunim that he had accepted upon himself. Yet when he saw his friend was shining and bright to the point where it was hard to look at him. His voice was clear and sweet, barely recognizable from the rough voice that he had when he was alive because of all the suffering. And he says to him, you don't know who the Baal Megale Amukot is and to what extent his psak halacha is respected here. All the gates of heaven are open before him. He's like the son of the owner of heaven, and all rejoice to do his will, and what he decrees is immovable. The friend that's still alive wanted to know the details. He says, it was not senseless fear that we had while we were alive. Doing tshuva in heaven is not possible. When my soul left my body, Immediately I was surrounded by a group of destroying angels, more numerous than the sand of the sea. Their appearance was so terrifying that from fear alone one could die 1,000 times. They had faces of many terrifying creatures, all holding spears aimed at me, pushing me down to zt'l, which is worse than Gehinnom. But this fear was only for one moment. Immediately, 4 malachei rachamim, angels of mercy, surrounded me, one above, one below, and one on each side. And they didn't leave me for a second. They protected me until after the hara, which is the purification of the physical body, when they clean the body before burial. The malachei Kabbalah, the angels of destruction, were still there hissing at me with their tongues of fire. But the malachei rachamim were like an impregnable wall of protection. When they put me in the casket, even more angels came down to protect me on the way to the cemetery, because just then infinite numbers of mazikim, harmful spirits, came to push me to the halls of darkness. When they lowered my body to the grave before covering me with dirt, these mazikim made a tremendous effort to attack me, but I was protected by the angels of mercy. After the funeral, when all returned home, the 4 malachei rachamim stayed with me. Then there appeared 4 more angels to take my soul before the Bet Din Shel Mala, the heavenly court. They took me upwards, and I felt like I was flying. Very quickly I reached a world of bright light, which the human mind cannot contemplate even a fraction. The 4 angels escorted me to a gigantic palace with walls of pure snow. Inside were pillars of fine gold and windows made of huge diamonds casting light of a rainbow for huge distances. I stood dumbfounded in amazement. Above the huge gate to the palace hovered the words, Makom HaMishpat, place of justice, carved with letters of bright fire. By the entrance crouched lions and tigers, roared at each soul that was brought in. The more sins done by the soul, the louder and more terrifying were the roars. The 4 angels carried me on their wings and brought me to the Makom HaMishpat. Here, the sight so amazing, I didn't know what to look at first. One couldn't grasp the vastness of the hall, even if looking from one side to the other. The ceiling and the floor were encrusted with beautiful shimmering stones, emitting beams of light so intense that they made our sun look like shade. In the middle of the hall stood a gigantic table, and around it were the judges of the Bet Din Shel Mala, the heavenly court. All of them are heavenly angels made of consuming fire. Over the top of the table hovered the words Torah Moshe Emet in fire. On the table was an open Sefer Torah with letters burning like hot coals. To this table they bring all the souls who have been brought up to be judged. At the time of the judgment, they open the pages of the personalized Sefer Zichronot, the book of memories, for each particular neshama. The book of memory is made of a parchment, and from it they read out all of the good and the bad deeds of the soul during their lifetime. Everything written in the book of memories is in the person's own handwriting. This is why your neshama leaves your body every day and you go to sleep. You go up to Shamayim, you write down what you did. You're thanking Hashem every morning that He returned your neshama because He believed in you. Why? Because the neshama didn't want to return after committing all the crimes and admitting to them. So now they read this book of memories out loud. For every judgment, there are angels of judgment and angels of mercy. The soul itself remains silent from fear. It does not feel worthy of being able to seek merit for itself and to counteract the words of accusation against it from prosecution. The heavenly court also brings witnesses to these judgments. While I waited for my turn, there was another judgment going on of another soul. During the judgment, they called upon the walls of his house to give testimony against him for a sin that he thought he was doing in private when no one can see. Different sentences were handed out for every judgment. Some are sentenced to Gehinnom, but they have also to decide what level of Gehinnom and how long. Obviously, it's not maximum 12 months like the heretics. Others are sentenced to go to Kafakela, wandering without rest or being thrown from one end of the universe to the other while constantly getting beaten by thousands of angels of destruction. And some are sentenced to go back to earth as a reincarnation, a gilgul of an animal or a flower, and to stay days or years on end until they reach their tikkun. If the soul is found guilty, the angels of destruction have the permission to grab the soul and take it to its place. The soul screams and begs for mercy and cries out in regret. But in the world above, there is no opportunity for tshuva on sins committed. They have no concept of mercy. In fact, their only pleasure is to inflict pain on wicked people. Sometimes it happens that a soul arrives white as snow, without a stain or dirt, and it's judge-worthy. Then a decree is heard in the upper worlds. Gan Eden! Immediately, heavenly angels rise from their places and call out in joyous songs, Ashrecha v'tov lach! You have merited the world to come. Group of angels with white wings surround the soul like a guard of honor and clear out the way as they sing out with happy melody. Make a way for the tzaddik. With indescribable honor and glory, the tzaddik is escorted to his place in Gan Eden. All the tzaddikim go out to honor him and receive him with great joy and tremendous love for their friend. The sun and the moon light up with gold and silver light. All the constellations bow down before the tzaddik as he arrives at the gates of Gan Eden. The whole creation calls out in musical song, Ashrei lo ve'ashrei chelko, fortunate he is and fortunate is his portion. But if the soul comes out guilty, then woe to it. The Bet Din Shel Mala shouts out chastisement that shakes the worlds. Rasha, wicked sinner of Israel, with such brazenness you rebelled against the commandments of the King of Kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You were given a pure and clean soul, and you were warned to guard it and retain its holiness and purity. In the end, you defiled with sins of worldly desires. Woe to you! The sound of chastisement comes down on the soul like thousands of hammers. Infinite destroying angels cover the soul. Thousands of hands grab the soul from the platform of judgment and pushes him to Gehinnom or gates al-mavet or kafakela. I myself, he says, slipped into a corner so they wouldn't notice me. I was trembling, thinking, has there ever been a wicked man like me to come here? I held on tight to the parchment of the Baal Megale Amukot. The souls passed through like sheep. This one for severe punishment, this one light punishment. No one passed without sin at all. Then I heard the announcer call on me, identifying. 4 angels gently escorted me to the Shulchan HaMishpat, and one of the angels opened the pages of my book of memories. Suddenly, a voice screamed out, "Who brought this wicked soul here? All the fires of Gehinnom will not suffice for him." I passed out from fear, but the angels revived me by touching me with their wings. I remember the parchment scroll given to me by the Megale Amukot, and I quickly placed it on the table. Then I heard a voice say, "What sort of words are these of the Baal Megale Amukot, that he should decide to excuse this soul from all punishment? He doesn't have so much authority as to give us instructions to accept the Teshuva of this sinner that caused others to sin, who fed non-kosher food to a complete city of Jews for decades, just for the lust of money?" Very quickly, there appeared a large group of angels that came to speak on my behalf. "Why do you still scorn this soul? Is all the suffering endured during his lifetime not enough? With such strength he revealed his sins in public and accepted shame and punishment. He threw away all his money and all the honor he collected during his lifetime. He gave up all earthly pleasures and endured 3 years of exile and excommunication and indescribable earthly tortures. He accepted it all with love and humility. If you were clothed with human bodies, you wouldn't be able to endure such pains. You would be broken immediately and would cease to do tshuva. Now you want to throw him into the fires of Gehinnom? The holy Rav Baal Megale Amukot has stated that he has endured all the pain and tears and has emerged pure and clean without any trace of dirt. Now you want to call him wicked? But the accusing angels screamed back with a voice that shook the worlds. Let us see what a catastrophe the soul caused with all of its sins. And within seconds, from all sides emerged thousands of souls, wailing, crying, and screaming. He caused us to die by plague because of his sins. I died in my youth because this wicked man fed thousands with non-kosher meat. We were children in yeshiva and had no taste of sin. We could have been great Torah sages, but because of this wicked man we died young. We were young women. We gave birth to children in holiness and purity. We hoped to raise them to Torah, marriage, and good deeds. Yet we died when we gave birth, or shortly after, and our children were left orphans without the love and care of a mother. We have no rest in the grave. The cries of our babies' mouth torture us. We constantly hover over them, and when we see the harsh treatment they receive from the nurses, we burn inside. For us, there's no need for Gehinnom. We have longed for the day when this wicked soul would come here, and we will vengefully witness how he will languish in Gehinnom. And now you say to let him free? No way! While these women were pouring out their bitterness into the hall, there streamed lines of cattle and sheep and goats, wailing loudly. And then a voice came out. We were reincarnated, awaiting our final tikkun in the lower world. These are people that reincarnated as sheep and goats and so on. We could receive our eternal rest only if we were slaughtered by a God-fearing holy Jew who would slaughter us with a fitting blessing. All the time we worried that we would be killed by a non-Jew without proper shchita, and when eventually a Jewish butcher bought brought us, we longed for the moment of the tikkun, but he took us to a secret cellar and killed us with an axe over our head, just like they do to pigs. Now we still roam the world awaiting our tikkun. I remained totally silent, unable to utter anything in my defense. When the chief defending angel saw that the scales started to tip towards the side of guilty, he took the scroll and said to me, "Do not be afraid. Wait for me here." He then flew upwards, and after a short time returned with a multitude of silver-winged angels, ready with new words of defense. It's true, the defendant did all of these terrible sins, more abundant than the hair on his head, but no one can deny that he was left an orphan at a tender age and was brought up in terrible conditions by a gross and brazen uncle. He worked him like a slave and taught him no wisdom, nor any Torah or any fear of heaven. He therefore fell prey to lust and worldly desires and was engrossed in sin without even realizing his evil ways. Also, no one can deny that as soon as he realized the gravity of his sins, he immediately admitted them and regretted them and immediately did Teshuva. For years he endured all the pain with love, indescribable pangs of hunger, cold, illness, shame, and disgrace. In every town he came, during years of wandering, he called out, "I am a sinner, please disgrace me and shame me and trample me underfoot." And all this is because he realized the gravity of his sin and undertook to do Teshuva completely, according to the instructions of the Bet Din of Krakow. That was the Bet Din of the Megale Amukot. Here is the scroll of the Baal Megale Amukot, who testifies that he fully repented during his final days on earth. Behold, the judgment is explicit in the Gemara. Since he already willingly accepted his punishment, he's totally free of any taint of sin. The words of these angels left a strong impression on the Bet Din Shel Mala, and they started again debating the case, and it continued for a long time. Then, finally came the decree. Just as he has been found in the lower court, so will he be found in the higher court. The verdict of the Baal Megale Amukot is final. The repentant butcher is free of all sin. Along with this verdict came out another verdict. All the souls and reincarnations that were waiting for their tikkun will now be perfected and are welcome to enter Gan Eden. Immediately, multitudes of angels began to descend and to carry each soul individually to its place in Gan Eden, each one according to the good deeds that it's done. Some of these souls immediately began to shine with a light that is impossible to describe to a human being. When they finished carrying all the souls into Gan Eden, they took me and placed me on a platform encircled by a group of angels shining like the heavens, all singing out loud, "He's innocent! He's innocent!" Then the heavens opened and revealed a sight that is incomprehensible to man. From all around came the singing of the angels. "Zakayu, Baal Tzaddik Amuru! He's innocent! He's a complete tzaddik!" Everyone sang shira, songs, including the Sefer Torah, pure tzaddikim, who came out of Gan Eden to meet me and honor me. The heads of all the tzaddikim were adorned with crowns and precious stones that beamed out sparks of light and colors. 6 fiery angels appeared carrying a splendid canopy with poles made of cedar and the covering of fine gold. In the center it read, "Ki Lashem Amelucha," for sovereignty is Hashem's. Together with this appeared a complete legion of musical angels, playing with an uncountable number of instruments. There were the Levites, the court of King David. All this entourage arrived at my feet, and then the angels carried me on their wings and placed me under the gold canopy. Immediately the musicians began playing and singing. The spiritual splendor experienced by listening to these songs is indescribable. A human who would hear this is liable to die the kiss of death from the intensity of its sweetness. So they began to escort me to my place in Gan Eden. He continued to describe all the glory and splendor with which he was escorted. And from whom did I receive all this honor? Holy, pure tzaddikim, whose faces shone like the heavens, and whose heads were crowned with the crown of Torah. Then 2 angels, whose splendor shone from their faces in a fine light that went for miles, came near to me with a crown studded with precious stones. On it hovered the words Baal Teshuva Gamur, meaning one who has done complete repentance. They placed this crown on my head with a great ceremony that cannot be described to man, and all the tzaddikim escorted me to the palace of the Baal Teshuva. As they departed, they called out to me, "Fortunate that you merited. Continue as before with all of your hardships, and don't think for a moment to slow down. It's better to withstand the most extreme torture in this world than to endure one moment of the pain of Gehinnom. The life of man eventually comes to an end, but the life in the next world lasts for eternity." Go to the Baal Megale Amukot and tell him all that I've told you, even though he knows all this better than I. Tell him and ask him to tell this story throughout the world, and they should print this story for the masses, so that all should know the following. 1. How much man must distance himself from sin. 2. To what tremendous heights a tzaddik can reach through his actions in this world. 3. How great is the power of Teshuva, which reaches the glorious throne itself, where in the place that someone does Teshuva stands, even the totally righteous cannot stand. 4. All shall know that rewards for mitzvot is indescribable and immeasurable. No human eye has ever seen it. Up to there is the extraordinary story from the Baal Megale Amukot of someone that went to the other side, came back to report what goes on over there, for those that do tshuva and for those that don't. Rabotai Karim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu repeats it countless times throughout the Torah that to serve Him, we must begin with fearing Him. Once we fear Him, we will see endless mercy. But if we stray right or left to our own desires that are against the Torah, teachings of heretics, whether they're Jewish heretics or Gentile heretics and idol worshippers, not only will we suffer a bitter end, but even this life will be full of falsehood, viciousness, animosity, war, and simply no mercy. Be'ezrat Hashem, each and every single one of us will choose wisely to go with the Torah and nothing else. Once we go with the Torah, we've already won.